Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Duck Chatter. Jonathan thought it might be a good idea to talk about the history of echo calls and kind of how I got started into making duck calls. So when I was about 25 years old, I was in 1975, I liked to duck hunt and I liked to bird hunt. So I had quail dogs and I'd go quail hunting in the morning, duck hunting in the afternoon. But the quail hunting kind of fell off, and I decided that I really like duck hunting, and so I wanted to make my own duck call. So at that time, there was probably about 4 people in this area that made duck calls. Chick Majors made one from Stuttgart. Howard Amidon made one, and he was in Lone Oak. Andy Bowles made one in Little Rock, and Dick Stewart made one, a Magnum Mallard, in North Little Rock. And those were about the only people that were making custom duck calls back then. Now there were some other manufactured calls back then, but nobody would really give you any pointers on, it was a big secret on how to make duck calls. So I decided I wanted to make one for myself, not to sell, just for myself so I could use it. And it turned out to be a little bit harder than I expected. I was able to turn a barrel okay. You know, the barrel just got a hole through it and it could be any shape. But the insert, of course, that's the main part of a duck call. That's what we call the business end. So I made some inserts and I made about 10. I couldn't get one to quack. I couldn't get one to do nothing. I made another 10. Same thing, and I was getting a little bit discouraged because I wasn't really making any progress. And after about the 50th call that I made probably that many, and turned the inserts down and tried to cut them out, and back then it was time consuming to do all that. I was just getting started at it and didn't know anything about it, and nobody was going to tell me anything about it. So I'm going to say about the 50th insert that I made and cut out, I finally got the thing to quack a little bit. It was still a piece of junk. And I worked on it a little bit, and I learned from what I did, what made things do a little bit better, what made things do a little bit worse. So I got that one to sounding, I'm going to say okay. It wasn't good by any means. And I took it hunting. And a friend of mine really wanted it, and so I gave it to him. I said, well, I'm going to make me another one. And so the next one I made was actually a little bit better than that one, and it was quacking right off the get-go, and it wasn't what I would call a good call by any means, but it was still decent. And you know, I took it hunting a couple more days, and one of the other buddies wanted it, so I gave him that one. Well, anyhow, this was about number 53, so I'm to a spot now where I can make one quack every time, and it's just things are working better. So this one actually came out pretty good. It sounded good. I mean, I liked it. I could hunt with it. I could call ducks in with it. It was what I was looking for. So I hunted with it, and a couple of the buddies tried to get it from me. I said, nope, no way, I'm keeping this one. I finally got one I want. So anyhow, rocked along there for about 2 weeks, and another guy came up to me as not a real good friend, but a friend, and asked me about it, and I said, no, I'm keeping this one. And he says, well, how about I buy it from you? And I said, no, I don't think I'm going to, pardon the telephone, but that's all right, we're going to keep going. So I said, I know, and he says, well, I'll give you $40 for it. And I says, well, you got yourself a deal. This is 1975, you know, that was pretty good money. So anyhow, I sold him that one for $40, and I made me another one, and it came out just like that one did. I finally had some direction. I kind of knew what I was doing. I made it, sold it, and made another one, sold it, and I was rocking along there, you know, for somebody that didn't know anything. And so the first year in 1975, I probably ended up making and selling about 50 calls. And not that I really wanted to, I wasn't trying to, but it just something I like doing, and so I'd go to my regular job and work, and then I'd come home and I'd make duck calls. So my wife put up with me for quite some time doing that, and a little bit of fussing, but not too bad. So anyhow, I kept on doing that, and I got better. Finally, I learned enough to get a jig, and I'll show you what a jig is. This is a jig, and you turn the insert down to a shape like this, and then you put it in the jig, and you tighten it up, and you take it over to a bandsaw, and you cut it out, and you stay as close to the jig as you can, and then there'll still be a little bit sticking up. After that, you take a file and you file it. But you know, you still have all kinds of problems, and everything is so important in making a duck call. So you got the length of the hole that comes into here. This would be the length of the hole coming this way. Then you got the depth of the hole coming this way. And everything's got to be exactly right in order for the call to sound right. So I made a little jig that drilled the hole exactly the same length. I made another little jig where I could slide the call into the jig the same length. And then I'd set it, and I cut it out, and I got fairly decent at it. The calls were still, I'd have to say, fairly crummy. They were not bad. You could call a duck with them, but there were nothing that I would write home about. But I was still making some and selling some, and I was learning all this time. So I actually, I kind of got better at it, and the next year I probably made 250, maybe even 300 calls, and I was able to sell all of them, and I got better each time I did it. I knew that I was going to need a name for my calls, so I thought about it, and that first year I kind of started thinking about it, and what sounds like a duck, you know, and I kept, and so I said, you know, an echo sounds like a duck, and so I just kind of stuck with that, you know, echo of a duck. So I mean, it could have been anything. If you make a good call, the name kind of gets better. If you make a bad call, the name kind of gets worse. And eventually, as the calls got better, the quantity went up. And, you know, I had to hire a couple of people, and I also started making more money as a part-time hobby than I was on my real-time job. So at around 1995, I went into it full-time and started CNCing calls and doing whatever I had to do to keep up with demand. And right now we have 3 CNC machines. We have like 11 employees, and we try to run as good operation as we can. So we've always tried to make the very best calls we could here at Echo Calls. We go over, if we have any bad calls, we won't send them out. If we feel like a customer would be uncomfortable with a call, we won't send it out. If a customer can't blow the call, we're going to try to help them learn how to blow it. But the things we do, we just try to have the best customer service and go from there. Well, anyhow, I've talked enough about the history of Echo Calls. If you got any questions about Echo Calls, feel free to call over here. You can ask us. You know, we talk on the phone with people all the time. But I hope you enjoyed this episode of Duck Chatter, and we're going to have another one in about a week or so, so just stay tuned. Thanks again.